Let me just say what an incredible honor and a pleasure it is for me to be here today. And I'd like to thank Chad and the Human Rights Campaign and all of you who traveled from all over the country to be here just for inviting me to join you today. I'd also like to welcome back Caitlin from her very inspiring trip to Russia, where she represented the United States with such pride and dignity. I'd also like to welcome two remarkable activists from the Caribbean, Caleb Orozco and Dane Lewis, who you're going to hear from in just a few minutes. We in the State Department have been following your work, and we have the deepest admirations for your courage and your determination. Recently, as Chad mentioned, we have seen some remarkable and some long overdue advances for the rights of LGBT persons here in America. This is thanks in large part to the advocacy and the steadfast determination of groups like the Human Rights Campaign, and for that, I applaud all of you. At the State Department, we view HRC as a vital partner as we work to advance equality for all, and we look forward to strengthening this partnership. Of course, the positive momentum that we're witnessing in this country is not free of hurdles. And indeed, as we look beyond our borders, notably in Russia, Nigeria, Uganda, and beyond, governments are cracking down on the ability of LGBT persons to live their lives with dignity and safety and with their full universal rights. Today, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about the State Department's work to protect the rights of all people globally. And I couldn't think of a better audience to address on this issue than HRC, a group of Americans who are staunchly committed to equality in our own country. This commitment to promoting human rights is deeply rooted in our country's founding principles and was further championed by Eleanor Roosevelt at the United Nations, resulting in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it was reinforced by President Obama when he named an incredibly distinguished delegation, including openly gay and lesbian American athletes, to the U.S. delegation to the Sochi Olympics. Protecting human rights is at the heart of American diplomacy, where we work to reinforce every day its universality. This means that no individual falls outside of the framework of universal human rights protections, and all governments have a responsibility to promote and protect these rights. Governments that deny rights to segments of their population, be it women, LGBT persons, disabled persons, or others, are not only failing to use the full potential of their citizens, but they will also hamper their own prosperity and stability. So part of our work involves monitoring and documenting human rights abuses committed against LGBT persons wherever they occur. On February 27th, Secretary Kerry released the 2013 reports on country human rights practices. Every one of the 199 reports we released includes a specific section on the human rights of LGBT persons. Now, these reports, as Chad mentioned, show that nearly 80 countries worldwide criminalize same-sex sexual activity between consenting adults or use other laws to prosecute and persecute LGBT persons. And we've also seen more countries enact even more restrictive measures recently. Late last month, Ugandan President Museveni assented to a law that imposes harsh punishments with severe restrictions on freedom of association and expression, and adds a variety of new offenses such as promotion of and aiding and abetting homosexuality. Earlier this year, the Nigerian president signed a law that not only criminalizes the display of same-sex intimate cohabitation, but also the support for meetings of LGBT persons or any type of LGBT organization. And last June, the Russian government enacted an anti-gay propaganda law that criminalizes free expression with respect to non-traditional sexual relations. Since that law's passage, we've seen an increase in violence and harassment of LGBT persons. Closer to home, 11 countries in the Caribbean basin criminalize same-sex sexual activity between consenting adults. While governments rarely enforce these colonial-era holdovers, we've seen time and time again that laws that discriminate serve to validate harassment, discrimination, and violence. Other countries, such as Cameroon, continue to actively enforce laws under which multiple people were arrested and detained last year because of their same-sex relationships. The country reports also demonstrate that violence and discrimination against LGBT persons continues to be a serious problem beyond those countries that criminalize LGBT status. Transgender individuals face a particular risk for harassment and violence, as in El Salvador, where a transgender woman employee of a local LGBT organization was brutally murdered in May. And even in countries such as Albania and Chile, which have legal frameworks to protect the rights of LGBT persons, civil society and media still report high rates of societal violence against LGBT persons. In light of all of these challenges, President Obama and others at the highest levels of the US government continue to champion equal treatment for LGBT persons around the world. In his 2011 landmark presidential memorandum, the President directed all US agencies engaged abroad to ensure that our diplomacy and our foreign assistance promote and protect the human rights of LGBT persons. This memorandum specifically directs us to combat criminalization of LGBT status or conduct abroad, to protect LGBT refugees and asylum seekers, to use our foreign assistance to protect human rights and advance non-discrimination, to respond meaningfully and swiftly to human rights abuses and violence against LGBT persons abroad, and to engage international organizations in the fight against LGBT discrimination. At the Department of State, we have stepped up to the challenge. Secretary Kerry has reaffirmed our commitment to combat discriminatory laws and practices that target LGBT persons. And he's continued the work post-DOMA to ensure that every State Department employee and his or her spouse in Washington or in the field can have access to their due benefits without regard to sexual orientation. Our Bureau of Consular Affairs now systematically ensures that online information is available against countries where there are concerns about harassment, threats, or violence against LGBT individuals, or where consensual same-sex sexual relations are criminalized, including punishment by the death penalty in Iran, Mauritania, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Yemen, and parts of Nigeria and Somalia. And my bureau, the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, leads the State Department's LGBT task force, which mobilizes our agency to respond swiftly to LGBT abuses abroad and spearheads the State Department's implementation of the President's call to action. Earlier this week, Ambassador Susan Rice, the President's National Security Advisor, spoke at our Global Chiefs of Mission Conference and asked our representatives, our ambassadors abroad, to be a clarion voice for LGBT equality. And I want to acknowledge the critically important leadership demonstrated by our US ambassadors, 5 of whom are openly gay, and 1 of whom is particularly well known to many of you. As the openly gay ambassador to the Dominican Republic, Wally Brewster has been a passionate advocate for human rights, even in the face of great odds. I think this is a skill that he likely developed and sharpened as an HRC board member. Our openly gay ambassadors to Australia, Spain, Denmark, and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, or the OSCE, have also been champions for equality. And I'm proud to count amongst our diplomatic ranks a number of staunch allies to the LGBT community, including the newly returned ambassador to Russia, Mike McFaul, and our ambassador to Uganda, Scott DeLisi. Last year, we began meeting quarterly with nearly 15 embassies in Washington to discuss country-specific strategies and developments at the UN and other multilateral fora. Our posts abroad have increased their reporting on LGBT developments, and several of our embassies, including embassies Managua and San Salvador, have developed their own internal coordinating mechanisms to ensure a holistic approach to LGBT engagement. Other embassies convene government and civil society stakeholders, bringing them around the same table, often for the first time, to discuss LGBT issues. The U.S. government works on these issues in close partnership with civil society organizations, including an 8-member NGO consortium that represents 5 different geographic regions. We also recognize that the specific actions we take must be tailored to the specific country context. To that end, we strive to support the efforts and seek the counsel of local civil society, whose work is vital to ensuring sustainable results. One of the most powerful tools we have at our disposal is the Global Equality Fund. Launched in December 2011, this fund supports civil society organizations worldwide in their efforts to protect and advance the human rights of LGBT persons. Since the fund's launch, and with the support of 13 like-minded governments, corporations, and foundations, and USAID, we've provided more than $7.8 million in over 50 countries to support groups on the ground as they protect human rights defenders, challenge discriminatory legislation, undertake advocacy and media campaigns, and document human rights violations that target LGBT persons. Over the last year, we've doubled the number of government partners in the Global Equality Fund, and as a result, we've been able to double the amount of funding available for programs across the world. We know that through the fund, our work is having an impact in remote corners around the world. For example, in Southeast Asia, we're working to expand tolerance and acceptance for LGBT persons by supporting civil society organizations to establish new PFLAG groups. As you well know, PFLAG groups here in the U.S. have played a critical role in fostering more tolerant environments for LGBT persons, and we're excited to support that model overseas. In one country alone, we supported and strengthened over 25 PFLAG groups. In the same region, we're also furthering public education on the human rights of LGBT persons through radio and video broadcasts. I'm excited to note that one video developed by a local civil society organization has been watched over 20,000 times, and the radio program set record numbers for listening, including in rural areas. And globally, we continue to ensure that advocates working in the most challenging and dangerous environments have the tools they need to conduct their work safely and securely. In the Western Hemisphere, through their public diplomacy and outreach, U.S. embassies have taken the initiative to produce videos for the It Gets Better campaign, host leaders from Human Rights Campaign to share best practices, and convene multinational corporations and civil society activists to discuss corporate policies that promote workplace diversity, including respect for LGBT persons. In a perfect world, every country would have its own version of HRC, an organization that builds grassroots support and advocates for change. I was so excited to see in November the launch of HRC's Global Engagement Program, and I know that the organizations you partner with abroad will benefit immensely from your expertise and guidance. From our own experience in the United States, we're under no illusion that our efforts and the efforts of civil society will be easy or that progress will be linear. But we believe that the challenges before us are not insurmountable, that rapid progress is possible, as we've seen here in the United States. From Moscow to Abuja, governments propose and at times succeed in passing laws with a discriminatory effect. Time will surely show that the authors of those laws were simply on the wrong side of history. But we can't wait for history. The work must be done now. We need more Belize cities where brave civil society organizations persevere in the face of negative societal attitudes, threats, and harassment. And from Kingston to Kampala, we at the Department of State will continue to promote the universality of human rights and support those organizations that advocate for equal rights, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. So I encourage you to read our human rights reports as you look beyond your borders and to share your experiences, your knowledge, and your resources with activists all over the world who are facing extreme challenges and overt hostility. Through partnership and perseverance, we can work together to achieve respect for human rights. And to quote Mahatma Gandhi, "First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. So let's win this. Thank you.